このゴールが達成できればゲームを作ることができます。だけどさらに支援をいただければもっと規模の大きいゲームを作ることができます。もっと敵が増える、もっとボスが増える、さらにもっと武器も増える、そしてさらにモードも増える。
Koji Igarashi is probably one of my new personal heroes after experiencing Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. Iga is a former producer of the Castlevania series, having first directed Castlevania Symphony of the Night back in 1997. When Konami wouldn't let him make the new Castlevania that fans wanted, focusing on mobile games instead, Iga left Konami in 2014 to kickstart and make a spiritual successor to Castlevania himself. Bloodstained Ritual of the Night is a really enjoyable Metroidvania. I've actually never played a Castlevania game myself before, but if Bloodstained's gameplay is anything like the older Castlevania games, then I've really been missing out. And from what I hear, it does play like some of the enjoyable old Castlevania games that we know. You fight demons and monsters as a shard binder, which are people that were experimented on by alchemists and now possess the ability to use the powers of crystal shards. As you fight your way through the levels, you gain more shards from the enemies and bosses you defeat, and you can use these new powers from the shards as a part of your loadout, sometimes needing these crystals in order to continue parts of the game or get access to secret items or areas. Visually, the game is fantastic. The way the backgrounds look with the 3D level design is just beautiful. I initially saw the old trailer for the game during one of my Anime Night Twitch streams a long time ago, and I remember not thinking much about it at the time, especially the visuals, which I didn't care for at all. But now, you can find a new trailer where Iga shows everybody else's criticisms on screen on top of the old gameplay before saying he'll prove us wrong, and then showing vastly updated visuals of the game. I gotta say, he knows how to market his games. And the game itself has a lot of little jabs at Konami everywhere, every now and then. It doesn't at all hide the fact that it's very clearly just a Castlevania game in everything but name, but it's definitely not a perfect game though. There's some things about it that definitely give it the Kickstarter game feel, especially during the dialogue scenes between the characters. It's just kind of painful with the UI and how it looks, for me. I feel like that really should have been tweaked. It's also hard for me to tell what parts of the levels are platforms and what parts are just background sometimes, but that doesn't happen often, and that might be something done on purpose to hide certain things later on in the game. The enemies and other characters of the game have great designs though. I especially love Zangetsu, even though all he's done so far is show up and kick my ass for about an hour because I'm bad at video games. But there's also a giant cat with horns in a portal. I mean, what more do you need to hear? Gamers are rising up in LuGame, an English visual novel by Urban Meadows. It's getting pretty hard to find new releases of quality English visual novels these days, especially on Steam. But with what looks like a small team of 4 people, Urban Meadows has made a fantastic little slice-of-life rom-com about a school gaming club that barely even has games. It's centered around interactions with its cast of waifus, each of which have their own charms to them, and all of them look amazing with their designs. Seriously, the art for this game by Spewing Muse is so good, I would have easily paid more just for that alone. The designs and expressions were what immediately drew me into wanting this game, but the way their characters develop and their banter with each other kept me hooked. There are 4 girls in LuGame. There's Tifa, the pink-haired busty childhood friend who loves gaming and very obviously has a crush on you. Stacy, the rich demanding student council president who flat out admits she wants you. KT, the short, cutesy, socially awkward president of the gaming club who believes she's actually a robot and has some of the greatest lines in the game as a result. And Alex, the mysterious, popular, perfect girl who comes off as fake as hell, like, immediately. The game's club itself is pretty scuffed, at first only having an incomplete deck of playing cards. It's basically one of those clubs where they just hang out with nothing they have to do. But in the game, you go on trips to anime conventions and the beach together and have little fun interactions with them. Out of the 4 girls, my favorite is probably KT, because not only does she have some of the best lines, I also had a similar awkward stage growing up where I thought I was a robot. It never got to the extreme levels that KT is at, but I can connect with that feeling of not fitting in with other people and wanting to cope with it by thinking you aren't human. In fact, there's quite a few of these nice little interactions for all of the characters that make them feel real. Probably the only girl I didn't like was Alex. Her design is the the least interesting to me. Her fake perfection is pretty apparent and makes her unappealing to me, and she has a tendency to just cut herself out of events with the group, so I barely get to see her develop as much as the others. I haven't beaten the game yet, but it's supposed to be about 8 hours of gameplay and has 3 routes you can go through. The only girl that doesn't get a route is KT, and I'm very disappointed to hear that given that she's my favorite. The main reason she probably doesn't is the fact that she's supposed to be younger, which they joke about immediately when they meet her, so they probably didn't give her a route because it would mean dating someone who looks like a kid. But the store page says all the characters are 18 or older, and the game isn't an adult one, so I don't really know why it would matter. You're all high school students. Who cares, I guess? And moreover, you can just have her route not be about dating her at all. It can be just about helping her overcome her social anxieties in a more natural way than pretending she's a robot, and growing friendships with her and others. There's so much potential for a KT route. While we don't get a route for KT, we do get one for Alex, even though she wants nothing to do with the group and is basically being dragged along by Stacy while trying to maintain her perfect status. Although I haven't reached the ending yet, so these opinions are subject to change, but at least I can still end the game with Stacy, who was a pretty close second for best girl to me, to be honest. LuGame is a great English visual novel with phenomenal art, excellent writing, and great characters that make it a fantastic grab for its $8 price tag. You like rhythm games? I do. I absolutely love them, and Muse Dash is definitely no exception. Pero Games released Muse Dash about a year ago on Android and iOS, but now it's being released on Steam and the Switch. It's very simplistic in its gameplay. You hit enemies to the beat of the songs. Pressing any button on the right side of your controller will hit the bottom enemies, and pressing any button on the left side will make you jump and hit the top enemies. There's notes you have to hold down, extra points you can grab or ignore, notes you have to hit at the same time, and bosses that throw stuff at you. Bigger enemies can collide with you, and you just spam all of your buttons to hit them as many times as you can to bump up your score. There's ghost enemies that disappear just before you hit them so that you can either hit for an extra point or you can just ignore them and you don't lose any health or your combo. There's also a fever mode triggered by how well you're doing, which gives you more points for each note you hit during it. The only thing that I don't really like about the fever mode is it seems to happen automatically and you don't seem to be able to just trigger it yourself manually, at least not that I've noticed yet, or not that the tutorial taught me to. And sometimes with the way it's timed automatically, it feels like a waste. Like, I've had times where fever mode gets activated and there's just no notes where I'm at, so the fever mode is kind of wasted. I don't know if that was just because of how well I was doing with the song, and that maybe if I was doing better, maybe then the fever mode would get me the most amount of points or what, but I feel like letting you manually trigger it, like in Guitar Hero with the star power, would probably make more sense. The game is very visually pleasing with its colors and designs. I was sold on this game just from how much effort they put into the trailer to make it look amazing. With most of these kind of rhythm games, the constant moving of the background enemies and the main character can be dizzying at times, but you get used to it after a while. There's 3 different characters with a lot of costumes, and you can unlock them by collecting enough randomly dropped items after completing a song. Every different character skin combo has a unique effect that can either help boost your score or keep you alive. I thought this kind of mechanic was weird at first to have, given that this game has a leaderboard system, an online leaderboard system, but I guess that isn't a huge problem because they don't increase the game's difficulty at all, so people can just complete the song wearing whatever skin that gets them the most points. That's kinda different from OS, which has a leaderboard system and also has mods that affect your score, but you have to earn those extra points because they change the song's difficulty. There's also elfins in the game, which are just familiars that float near you and also have special effects that help you out. They're kinda like the little accessories for your skin, basically. And you get some challenges every 6 hours in the game to help boost your level up. The songs have normal and hard modes, but to unlock the master difficulties of songs, you have to at least get an S rank on the hard mode. I don't know if I like this because, as I've experienced in other rhythm games, the faster paced song maps can be easier for some players that are more used to using their reflexes, or because it's just easier for them to stay on beat when it's faster. But this wasn't as much of a problem as I thought because some of the character skins are just there to make the game easier and more enjoyable for you. One skin won't let your combo drop if it's under 100, and one will just give you 5% more accuracy in your final score. So getting an S rank on songs isn't that difficult when you use these skins, even on some of the more harder songs. The game itself carries an incredible amount of value, with the base game being just $3. And the base gets you a whopping 40 songs that you unlock as you level up. There's also a free music pack that you unlock at level 30, and if you end up enjoying the game a lot, you can buy the Just As Planned DLC for $30, which contains 13 other music packs with 6 songs in each, totaling 78 songs. So for just $33, you get about 120 songs, and you have access to future music packs as they're released. It's kind of like a season pass, except that the game actually came out on mobile last year. So for these new versions right out of the gate, you get a ton of content for buying the season pass, instead of having to wait forever for any season pass content to come out like some other games. Educational games that aren't geared for children can be hard to do well, but the Expression Amrilato gracefully balances learning a new language with a beautifully written Yuri visual novel story. I've played visual novels before aimed at dealing with language learning, and most of them would just come up with some cheesy story as an excuse for why you're learning. There's nothing really wrong with them because they do well with teaching, but the Expression Amrilato has found a way to write itself in such a perfect way that you actually feel a legitimate reason and connection for why you should learn. You play as Rin, who is one day suddenly brought into an alternate world where the sky is always pink, all the history is slightly different, and, most importantly, everyone speaks a different language. Rin is now stuck in a new world with no way to communicate with anyone and no idea what's going on with her. Naturally, she crumbles and starts to feel hopeless, but a girl named Ruka finds her and tries to help, giving her a home, helping her learn the language, and developing a relationship with her over time. The language in the game is called Juliamo, but it's actually based on a real language called Esperanto, which is the most widely used constructed international language. It was designed as a language people could learn as a sort of common tongue, and the developers of the game actually made this with the official supervision of the National Esperanto Association. So this is an officially supervised game that will actually teach you a real language. The game's alternate world occasionally gets visitors like Rin from the other worlds, and they have entire government centers set up to help these visitors survive and learn the language. They even give them a stipend if they're a minor. And one thing I really love is that the writers went so far with their world building that they even said that some people tried to abuse the visitor registration system in the past and now have to interview people to actually confirm it. It's a nice little touch that adds to the realism of being in this kind of situation. Japanese is still a language that exists in this alternate world, but it's a little different. Ruka knows a little bit of that Japanese and uses this knowledge to try to bridge the gap in her communication with Rin. Thanks to the past visitors that came from similar Japans, the visitor registration has some versions of Japanese that they already know about and can translate into Juliamo. They use this as a catalyst for why, in this frightening situation, you're still able to learn the language. There's a massive language barrier that you have to slowly start to tear down. First through just guessing and gestures, and later through interactions that lead to funny little misunderstandings. Playing this game in English is kind of like a three-way language dance because it was originally in Japanese, and it's about learning Esperanto, but it's all translated into English. Sometimes it could be 3 layers of misunderstandings or jokes, so God bless the people in charge of localizing this game into English, because they did a pretty great job. In between the thematically engrossing story about communication, the game does really well with teaching you Esperanto. You learn some initial easy phrases just from your character's attempts at establishing communication. Then you learn the alphabet, and then you start to learn more phrases. Some of the phrases that were more difficult to understand but your character now learns will be pointed out, and then she even gives you little easy ways to remember them. A lot of Rin's dialogue during the learning process was actually some of the exact same thoughts I was having while learning the language as well. And I really enjoyed that kind of shared learning connection. You also get reviews, homework, study cards, and quizzes that can help you nail down the knowledge more. But if you struggle with the learning or want to just stick with the story, you can actually turn these off in the options menu. What really amazes me about the Expression Amrilato is how well its theme of communication is used in the story. Like I said before, this game isn't set in an alternate world just as an excuse to learn. It's a pivotal driving point of its themes. It feels like this beautiful story about feeling isolated and alone and scared in a world that doesn't understand you, and the cheerful moments when you do break through and make a connection with someone, was written without the idea of actually being an educational game. It's almost like the introduction of language learning mechanics was an afterthought that was incorporated amazingly. Even the language they chose fits in great thematically. They could have picked any language to teach you, English, Russian, whatever, but instead they chose a literal world language in their game about dealing with isolation. A language literally designed to connect people. The Expression Amrilato is $25, and it's well worth it for its 10 to 30 hours of story, cute character developments, its extensive Esperanto learning material, and its fun interactive review mechanics. It's, dare I say, très bonnet. That's the first episode of Steam Weeb. For those of you who don't know, I do weekly anime night streams on Twitch, where we look at literally every new anime game that comes out on Steam that week. This video was my first attempt at trying out some of the best ones in a more edited and structured format. If you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button, or check me out on Twitch sometimes. And if you really enjoyed it, consider donating to me on Patreon, where you can directly help to funding these kind of game reviews and other videos. That's all for now. Follow me on Twitter, follow me on Twitch, follow me in life, and I'll talk to you all later.